So my name's Sean Casey. I work at Checkmarx. I'm a senior solutions engineer director. Been there for about 7 years. And I'm going to be talking about AI package hallucination with supply chain security. I'll talk about some other threats too and how they correlate to the AI package hallucination there. So there you go. We'll start off by giving an overview of supply chain security. I'm sure a lot of you already know what it is since it's been around for the past 2 years. We'll go into the different threats and then we'll talk about some threat prevention. So supply chain security can really correlate to the traditional supply chain. You have your build materials, which is your source code and your dependencies. As they move along, they're created in the factories. That's like your build system and the engineers that create it. Okay? Then they go along to the delivery system. That's going to be your package managers or else the repos that they're pulled from. And they go to the marketplace. That's your application repositories and everything. And then they're deployed to the users up top with traditional supply chain, or they're deployed to the different systems. Okay. So over the past year, these type of supply chain attacks have gone up 633%. CISOs, over 90% of CISOs are really worried about this because if you think about it, over 90% of applications have some sort of third-party open source code within them. There's another quote here, whether through infiltrating the software delivery pipeline, deliberately uploading malicious components to popular repositories, or taking advantage of existing vulnerabilities in open source components, attackers are leveraging gaps in the supply chain controls. So when we talk about supply chain threats, we're talking about malicious packages. But what's the difference between that and regular software composition analysis? So software composition analysis is looking for packages that are vulnerable. So when a package is vulnerable, the original intent was to be made as a resource for the open source community. At some point in time, there was coding errors, design flaws, or improper configurations that made it vulnerable. So it had a common vulnerability enumeration tagged onto it, considered vulnerable, and now contains a vulnerability, and you have to decide whether you're going to move up a version, move down a version, or else choose a completely different package. When we're talking about malicious packages, it's either a package that existed that an attacker took over, or attacker created a completely new package with malicious intent to steal data, install malware, or disrupt operations. So the difference is, the malicious packages with supply chain were created for that sole purpose. So now you have a little background. We'll go into AI package hallucination. So everybody's heard of AI hallucination before. I believe in February, not dealing with AI package hallucination, but there was a columnist from the New York Times that was using Bing, and the AI called itself Sydney, said it was madly in love with him, and told him to divorce his wife. Now that's a great example of hallucination. If we tie it into AI package hallucination, it's basically saying that something doesn't exist. So if I'm a developer and I'm looking for some sort of package, let's say through PyPy, I ask it, give me 5 packages that can deal with serialization. ChatGPT, for example, will give me maybe 4 packages that exist and then hallucinate one that doesn't exist. It's not really a big deal, because if you do your research, you're going to find that it doesn't exist, no problem. But if I'm an attacker asking those same questions, I could find all the ones that exist, throw those out, I could take the ones that don't exist, and then I could create those packages with malicious intent. I could also use other attack surfaces within the supply chain to make it look like those packages have been around, to trick users. So now I created my packages that used to not exist, And then as a user, I'm asking those similar questions. I'm looking for PyPy packages for serialization. Now the packages that didn't exist before exist, but they're malicious because the attacker created them. And then my user information gets stolen, or other things could happen depending on what kind of malware they stored in the process. So this is the whole thing, kind of broke it apart because it's a lot to digest all in one slide. So we did a little research. Checkmarx and Vulcan.io talked to and did research with ChatGPT, asking a series of coding questions based on popular posts on Stack Overflow. So they asked for packages focusing on serialization, math, scraping, and technologies. They focus on Node, so NPM, and then Python, PyPy. With the questions asked for Node, 201, 50 of those came back unpublished. Okay, so 50 of them didn't exist. With PyPy, 227 questions asked, 100 of them didn't exist. So you can imagine if we were an attacker doing that same thing, we could create those 150 packages, and then they would be in the atmosphere there. So talking about AI package hallucination, I'm going to touch base on how they could kind of daisy chain a couple of these attacks together. But for right now, I want to focus on dependency confusion, just to kind of give you an overall of some of the other threats in supply chain. So dependency confusion is when an attacker publishes a malicious package to a public repository with the same name or naming convention as a popular package or an internal package from a company or enterprise. Okay, so the way it's supposed to work is you get a mix of private and public packages. The private dependencies are hosted privately. The public dependencies are downloaded from the internet. If you have something in your private repository that is of a lower version than the one that is in the public repository, it'll download the most recent one. So what the attackers are doing is they're trying to use similar naming conventions as enterprise companies, but they're changing the version to like something super high, like 999.999, whatever. And they just have that higher version number. The malicious packages are then taken instead of the internal packages, and then that malware can infect the system. So that happened with PyTorch. So back in 2022, you have this package called Torchatron that was in PyTorch's local repository. But someone outside of a threat actor actually created it in PyPy, the same package with a higher version number. It took priority over Torch Triton from PyTorch. They downloaded it, and the attackers were able to steal SSH keys, environment variables, and system information. And PyTorch did release a new version of Torch Triton with a prefix of PyTorch to stop that going. But I believe 2,300 downloads happened before they actually did that. Okay. So the next one would be typo squatting. So this is unlike dependency confusion. We're actually trying to use a similar name to popular packages, maybe changing one letter, or more even popular, since it's case sensitive, changing an uppercase to lowercase or something of that. So that way you could trick someone. Me, I have fat fingers, so I'm going over the keyboard and maybe I type the wrong thing, or maybe in your manifester, if I'm using a task runner, you write it wrong there and you download the wrong one by mistake. But it looks like the same thing if they create it correctly, and then you have malicious code there. So you can see with the legitimate package, you have the local, it's a little blurry there, but it's local forage dash, and then you have camel case memory storage driver on the left. On the right, it's all lowercase, and that's the typo squatting package. So one of them is legitimate, the left one's legitimate, and then the right one is actually malicious. So it's hard to decipher at times. So this happened, I believe, in June of 2021. Everybody knows Discord servers. Well, Python had a package created called discrod, which I find that humorous anyways, just in the name. But it was downloaded, and this was the malware was actually a worm. So not only was it stealing credentials, it took the Discord token, and if you have the token of Discord, you're able to log in and basically be that user. But it also tried to steal the Chrome passwords and then the master Chrome encryption from that. The worm part is that it would send itself out to all of that person's friends on Discord as well. So you can see how that is a bit unpleasant. And then repo jacking. So an attacker compromises the account of a legitimate open source project or maintainer and uploads a malicious package to the repository. This basically means, like, at some point in time, a user is utilizing a repository, they end of life it or move on to something else, and that repository is parked there. Someone else could take it over and then use it for malicious intent. So a user creates an original repository, changed the repository name. Now it's a new repository, but this old repository is out there in the ether. So a hacker could create that repository with that same name of my repository and then have it with malicious intent. One that wasn't on the thing, and this is relevant because I have one more attack that I wanted to show, but it utilizes typo squatting and starjacking. So I need to tell you about starjacking first before we go into that. Starjacking is basically, it affects PyPy, NPM, and Yarn, okay? It basically means when you're creating a package, there's a link that you could put to your GitHub repository. But it doesn't check. It doesn't check to make sure that what you have in your package is the same thing as that. So what you could do is you could create malicious content and then link to somebody else's GitHub repository, and it looks like you're getting all their stars, all their forks, all of their open issues and PR. So it looks like you've been around maybe a little bit longer because of that popularity. So, like I said, in September 2023, not too long ago, there was someone who was creating typo squatting or malicious packages utilizing both typo squatting and starjacking. The attacker targeted Alibaba Cloud, Telegram, and AWS developers in a PyPy campaign. The malicious code was hidden within the functions. So this is a little bit different. Usually, when packages are created, malicious packages, they usually put the malicious code within the setup. So as soon as you download it, it's setting it up and it's doing that. But it actually waited for certain commands. So anytime you use the send function, that's when it would do that. It would steal like secret keys and other things like that. And it's just, let's see here. And here's a list of all of the different malicious packages, which ones were typo squatted, which ones were starjacked, and also the percentages of who it affected. United States makes up almost 50%, with China in second place there. But starjacking is something that someone could easily use with AI hallucination as well. And they could also spoof how long a repository has been around to kind of fake that popularity too. So that's something else that they could use with AI hallucination. Okay. So with preventative measures, you should never blindly trust third-party sources. There are certain ways if you're with dependency confusion to double check and kind of fingerprint your packages to make sure that you're not downloading other outside packages just because they're doing that. That goes along with only download from trusted sources. Use a dependency management tool, SCA, SCS scanners, so that we keep up. Educating your developers is also huge. I've heard of other companies whitelisting, blacklisting, or creating policy management around those as well. And then sharing with the community is huge. Like, supply chain is 2 years in, and it's still popping up, but there's really no universal, like with software composition analysis, we have the NVD database and some other databases that correlate them all together. Supply chain doesn't. So you have companies that are working together, but there's really no universal way yet. So that's something that we need to work on. So there was a survey done by Stack Overflow. This just gives you an idea of the people that they surveyed. This is just to finish up with the AI package hallucination thought from the beginning. AI tools in 2024, like, this is where people think everything's going out of the people that they surveyed. Deployment and monitoring, collaborating with teams, coding, debugging, and writing code, over 52%, 46%. It seems like it's going to be a lot different in the upcoming years. It's moving at a very fast pace. So with Checkmarx, we have a development hub that has some free tools for starjacking, chainjacking, other things like that. We came up with a ChatGPT plugin to check for supply chain to see how long packages have been around to kind of stop AI hallucination or eliminate it. Obviously, you'd need to follow up and do some additional things, but that's there. But yeah, that's about it. Open to have conversations, questions, anything like that. I have socks, so if you talk to me, I'll give you socks. Yes?
A few years ago, there was, I forget the name, they had network monitoring software, and that's how they got they put, I guess, an upgrade package, an upgrade patch or something, and if you downloaded the patch and installed it into the software, it actually would go in and create a vector route to wherever, I can't remember,
SolarWinds.
SolarWinds.
So if you, that's actually really funny, because SolarWinds was actually, to me, was really the revolution of supply chain security, because that was the biggest one. I'm sure it's been around beforehand, but from that point on, that was the buzzword, supply chain attack, everything, and that really started supply chain security buzzing around, because you're talking, we didn't have an answer for it. Nobody really had an answer for it. People were creating blogs and trying to rush as quickly as possible to figure out what's going on, that was I think like 2 years ago, and now we have like supply chain actually solutions and scanners and everything.
I was just going to ask about starjacking.
Yeah.
Has GitHub or similar repositories acknowledged any responsibility for allowing starjacking to happen by not doing further checks?
I don't think so, not yet. But like the due diligence on the person side to double check the repository that they're linking to make sure that it matches is something that could also be added as a preventative measure. I'll follow up on that. The starjacking one was a little bit more recent, especially with 2023, that it's still happening. So I was actually like the last couple of ones about the typo squatting and starjacking I created last night because the article just published a couple days ago. So I wanted to add fresh content. So I got 2 people who have socks. I have two more, yes.
Is there a way that we can defend or train the developers, to not download malicious packages or packages that may have been hallucinated?
So the hallucination ones, like finding out how long the package has been around, if it's starjacking, point, making sure that the repo that it's linked to is actually the repo that it lines up with the package. Utilizing trusted sources that even if it's a trusted source, it can be compromised. So there's just a lot of due diligence behind there, and it might not always be on the developer's responsibility. It could be a shared responsibility between developers and the security team.